In this episode of a Sam Oldham podcast, I'm joined by Lucie Colebeck. In 2015, Lucie became the world tumbling silver medalist. Following her tumbling career, she went on to perform with the world-famous Cirque du Soleil in the Alegria show, and this is her story. Lucie, thank you for joining me this morning. This is really exciting. We've just come off the back of a conversation with Bryony Page, and it was a really interesting conversation. I think there's some similarities. I read a little bit about your story and the mental blocks that you struggled with, and Bryony had a similar thing. I didn't know that about Bryony's story. I just wanted to start off, Lucie, at the beginning. And what I noticed from Bryony's story as well is that it seems a lot of people that branch into those disciplines of gymnastics that are not necessarily men's artistic or women's artistic, so trampolining, tumbling, parkour, a lot of them seem to start in artistic and then maybe don't fit into the rigidity of it, maybe in the structure, and then find themselves staring at the trampoline or the tumbling track. Was that a similar story for you?
So actually it wasn't. First of all, Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here. But no, my story in terms of starting tumbling is funny because, it's funny you say that because I actually always wanted to do artistic. So I actually came from swimming. I think I started swimming when I was about 4 years old. My parents just, chucked us in swimming lessons and I loved it. And when I got to about kind of 7 or 8, I was really enjoying it, and I was like, I love swimming. I really want to do this as like a full-time sport sort of thing. And pretty much I was short, stocky, and my swimming coach was like, you're not really I get, Lucie, you have a dream, but you're not really going to be a great swimmer. So I was like, oh, okay. So they pointed me in the direction of diving and gymnastics, and I tried diving, and I was like, it's okay, but I don't love it. And then I tried just a general gymnastics, recreational class. And obviously I loved it. I was in there for I think 3 months. And then I actually moved over to team gym. Okay. So I don't know if you know about,
I know of team gym. Yeah.
Yes. You've got the floor, you've got trampette, you've got vault, and you've got tumble. And I did that for about a year, I think, up until the age of 9. And I was only really good at tumbling. And then when my coach, I was playing on trampoline, and for months he would just kind of hover, and the tumbling coach at the time would just kind of hover and look at me training, and he was so scary. He was this Russian man in the gym, and you kind of sat there oh my god, what are you looking at? And eventually he came up to me and he just said, look, do you want to join tumbling? And I it's funny because I remember his wording. I was only 9 at the time, and he came over to me and he was like, hi, my name's Vov. And he was like, do you want to join tumbling? If you do, I'll make you the next best thing. And obviously me being little me was like, oh, sure, yeah, what the hell is tumbling, And I tried it and literally never looked back. It was just it was that sort of thing where the moment I stepped on the moment I jumped on the track properly into not doing little team gym stuff, I just fell in love with it. And it wasn't until maybe a few years into doing tumbling, the women's artistic program we had was just getting better and better. And it was that thing where I was that I think would have been for me. If I had come into a women's artistic program, I think I would have loved that. So yeah, that's always kind of an opportunity that I wish I had. But I'm not complaining with how my career went. So.
And what club was that at, Lucie, right? Because typically speaking, I think artistic clubs and tumbling clubs aren't normally clubs that maybe have a tradition in successful tumbling or a tradition in successful artistic. It's not normally in the same gym. For example, I was at Nottingham. There was a tumbling group, but I don't think they were that successful. It was mainly the artistic that was successful there. But I know in a lot of the tumbling teams, is Pinewood a good tumbling gym? Is that right?
So I've been at Pinewood.
So was that your club?
Yeah.
Okay,
so
brilliant.
I started there. I never changed. And yeah, when I joined tumbling, we only have women's artistic. We don't have men's. So the women's artistic program wasn't that strong, and it was only as I was progressing in tumbling, it was getting stronger. But I would say, and I think a lot of people would say, that tumbling does dominate Pinewood. So yeah, it's more tumbling. Maybe I'm being biased, but I think tumbling does get the better results out of the two disciplines.
And were you seeing, Lucie, from that young age of 9, even when you were doing team gym and Vov was watching you and he kind of spotted something in you, some kind of talent, were you seeing the senior gymnast tumbling? Because, for me, when I go to Lilleshall at training camps, I get really excited when the tumblers were there because I love tumbling myself. So I just find it really exciting. I'd love watching you guys. And it's so... it's such a, I'd describe it as quite a raw sport in the sound. You know, when you're in the gym and you're doing pommel horse, it's very methodical, but the sound of people coming down the tumbling track, especially when they're finishing with triple backs and double straights and stuff, it's super exciting when you're a kid because you're like just looking up at these people and they're so high. Did that kind of pull you in as well, being able to see that?
Yeah, definitely. And it was really weird because when you were talking about the sound, I literally just got goosebumps all over me because our training days, I think we only crossed over like a couple of days or a couple of hours where we saw each other train. And literally it was that thing. I didn't necessarily watch them, but because you could just hear it, for me, I was like straight away, I was like, whoa, like, what is that? And when I was younger, it was only really a lot of seniors, so like the bigger gymnasts. We had a lot of guys, we had a few female tumblers, and yeah, just the sound of it. And then I just remember looking over and thinking, that is like the most explosive sport that I've ever, like that is like, how are people doing that? Yet they were making it look so elegant, which is what I think like captivated me. And I think it was such a nice mix to have. And yeah, when I joined, it was that thing where I was training alongside those bigger tumblers, and I was like, wow, like if I can be like that one day, that would be so cool.
And what kind of things in tumbling that you were doing in team gym? You said that like naturally you felt like tumbling was your better discipline of all of those 4 disciplines you do in team gym. What were the things in tumbling that you love to do? You know, was it going backwards? Was it going forwards? I'm guessing in tumbling, right, it's mainly going backwards. If you come from an artistic background, you probably learn to go forwards a lot more first and you're a bit scared of going backwards. But you guys don't really have a fear of going backwards. Was it that? Was it flicks and whips and somersaults and straight backs and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it was it was a real mixture of, yeah, like I really enjoyed going backwards. But also I think it was just, I mean, I wasn't very good at dancing. So being like doing a floor routine, which was the only mandatory thing you had to do in team gym. So everyone has to do floor routine and then you could pick and choose, you know, if you were good or if you weren't so good at what sort of thing you wanted to do in terms of vault, trampette and tumble.
Okay.
I always did tumble, and back then I don't know what the rules are now, but you had to do a forwards tumble, a backwards tumble, and a mixed. And I only ever did the backwards tumble. So like when years down the line, when you think of it, you're kind of like, oh yeah, I'm definitely suited to tumbling rather than team gym because I wasn't forwards tumbling. And then yes, as soon as I joined and started going backwards, it just like clicked. And it just felt a lot more natural. And I thought, because there was a period of time where I was like, oh, but, I'm with a group of girls and it's really fun, like for the social side of it. And I'm going into an individual sport. When I was younger, there was only me and one other girl that trained in terms of like our age. The rest of them were 18 and over. Okay. So it was the beginning of it was quite lonely. But as soon as, it was great in a way because we were having one-to-one training with my coach Bob all the time. So you were just learning so quickly.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's really interesting what you said about your swimming coach saying that you're not built for swimming, because we've spoke about this on the podcast before, and I've heard someone say in the past on another podcast, do swimmers look like swimmers because they swim, or are swimmers attracted to swimming because they're built like swimmers? And I think a lot of kids that are attracted to gymnastics are maybe those kids that are a little bit neurodiverse, maybe the kids that can't sit still at school and they end up, they're climbing everything, right? Is there any commonality, and I asked Bryony this, in the characteristics of the kids that you see now, having been your whole life in tumbling, that almost they end up in tumbling? Are they more adrenaline junkies? Do they like danger, going backwards? They tend to be more brave. Is there any kind of commonality between their personality and the characteristics that you'd say maybe is a common thread between a lot of the tumblers? Or maybe not. I asked Bryony this question and she said no. In trampoline, and everybody's different types of characters. I just wondered whether in tumbling, because it is so explosive and so powerful, it's almost like the motocross of gymnastics, right? Like it's fast. Oh, yeah. So it's like that. Do you tend to get the kids that really like going fast in tumbling, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of similar to Bryony. From what I see nowadays, I think it is sort of a mix of anything. I mean, yeah, typically the people that I enjoy to watch tumbling, they do sort of have similar body to, I won't say to me, but they have, big calves and it's like very powerful legs. So, but that's just how the people that I like to watch. But when I go into the gym now and I see like the development kids and the junior tumblers that are progressing into senior, like there is such a mix of people. They all do have sort of that common I wouldn't say it's too much adrenaline, but they're just so eager to like, it's almost like go, go, go. Like, and I feel like that's what tumbling sort of is. Like, again, I was only surrounded really by team gym and a little bit of women's artistic, but for me, whenever I looked at them, it was quite a slow training session. Whereas for us, I just felt like we were like, okay, go again, go again, go again, go again. And I don't know whether that was Vov, kind of like, we were just always going. It was,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It was sort of that like that energy you could just
Yeah.
feel. And when I go into the gym now, you can feel that energy as well from the tumblers.
That's interesting. My coach, Sergey, would never let us sit down. Was Vob the
Yeah,
same?
same with Vov,
He'd
yeah.
never let me sit down. If we sat down, he'd come right over, get up on your feet. It's like, what? And then you
Yeah.
just end up, because you stood up, but you just go more. You just keep going more rather than sit down.
Definitely.
That's really
I
interesting.
remember when we were younger, my coach Vov, he used to call us pigeons if we sat down, and we weren't allowed to sit down. It was just, but yeah, like I said, because of that, you should end up going more, which also you then learn more, because the more you're doing, the more you're failing, the more you're progressing. It's
What was a typical week of training for you when tumbling became a bit more serious and you were kind of selected there by Vov and you're training with specifically the tumbling program? What would that look like when you were growing up, Lucy?
So I think my sort of, when I first joined tumbling, I think, like when I explain it to people, some people like, well, a lot of people say, oh, wow, you're so lucky. Because like I said, from 9 to about 11 maybe, or 12, my training, it was literally only myself and one other girl. So it was pretty much one-to-one training the whole time. And the beginning part of it was just it was intense. It was so intense. We were going all the time. But then again, when I look back on it, I'm like, wow, that's why I learned everything so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think I learned all my skills by the age of 12. Like, in terms of like, I mean, obviously not like I didn't do villas or didn't do triples by that age, but up to full straight, I'd learned everything. And then from then on, it was just kind of piecing it in different places. And it wasn't perfect, but off trampoline, like the spatial awareness was there for a lot of skills. But yeah, the first 6 months to, well, I remember the first 6 months of it, I had to change my round off. So I literally spent 6 months on the floor on a line doing round offs every session.
Can you remember why? I'm guessing that came from Vov, right? Can you remember what was the reason for him changing that, Lucy? Because I have a really interesting experience of when I started coaching. I started working at the gym that I'm from, Notts Gymnastics Academy, and I was there for about 8 months. And I would work with a whole spectrum of groups. So literally 5-year-olds that are doing rec to like men that are training for like the world championships and disability. And then my favorite group was a group of 8-year-old girls. And so I'd work with all these different groups, and I came across about half a dozen kids that were really struggling to twist forwards. And I was going, what's going on here? Like there's something going on, because this is too many kids that are training 20 hours a week. And I figured out that a lot of them were twisting different ways, forwards and backwards. And when I started to ask some of the coaches, how do you teach a cartwheel or a round off in the beginning? They'd say things like, oh, well, I just get the kid to lean forward and whichever foot they put out, that's the foot they go with. And I was like, that seems like a big risk to take when that's going to determine literally every twist of direction for the rest of their career. I'm really interested to hear from you. Why did you have to change that round off, Lucy?
So mine was pretty much the same. When I got into team gym, oh, Lucy, do a round off. Like, which leg do I put? Oh, whatever one you want. So I put my right leg forward. When I started twisting backwards, naturally left was just like super easy. And when I was with Bob, he did try, obviously, because he noticed straight away, oh, you round off on your natural twisting. He did ask me to twist the other way backwards, like to the right. And it was okay, but it didn't feel as natural. So, in the long run, Vov said, I either change a round off now, we go through a bit of a tough time and a boring time now, or it's going to really mess you up for the future. So yeah, and that's why we changed my round off to left. So now I can round off like both sides. But I also was the same. When I got to an age where I was learning sort of like doubles and stuff like that, I was getting confused because Vov wanted to teach me, I call it the trampolining way, where like, that they kind of incorporate the forwards twisting in a backwards somersault. And for years, up until I was maybe 20, I couldn't understand it. I was like, no, I'm traveling backwards. I'm doing a full backwards. But yeah, the forwards twisting really confused me, because in my head I was like, yeah, but when I do a Brani, I'm going to the right because my right foot is going forward. But then when you break it down, obviously your tummy's facing the left. So I do think it is like when I go into gyms now and I say, okay, let's work on some like front halves or some Branis, people just say, okay, I round off with my right foot in front, so I'm going to Brani with the same way. But obviously that's not the case, is it? So I think, yes, there is a lot of confusion with that. I mean, I don't teach tumbling now. I just teach more kind of recreational sort of gymnastics, and occasionally tumbling, but not so much. But yeah, there is such confusion. But I think the way that our program at Pinewood does the tumbling, they are incorporating the trampolining style of twisting, which you probably do it yourself, maybe like, half in, 1.5 out.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting.
Yeah. Backwards.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, and I find that fascinating, because for me, and are you right-handed or left-handed, Lucie?
To write, I'm right-handed.
When you're writing, so you're right-handed. Yeah. So you go round off on your left foot.
Yes, yeah.
So when I explain it because I try, even when I teach recreational and I go into schools, I say, look, guys, if you can already do a cartwheel, don't let me confuse you. Do your normal cartwheel. But if you want to do it like me or learn how to do a cartwheel maybe slightly better, this is how we're going to do it. And I explain to them, I'll ask a kid, do you write your name with your left or your right? And they'll say right. And I'll say, where's your left hand? And they'll go on the table. I'll go, great. So your strong one wants to be on the floor and the right one does the moving. And then I'll say, right, some people think I look like Jack Grealish. And I'll take my cap, I've got quite long hair. So a lot of kids are like, you look like Jack Grealish, the footballer. And so I'll say, right, imagine I'm Jack Grealish and I've just taken a free kick, and I'll kick the air and I'll say, where's my left foot? And they'll go on the floor, and I'll say, oh, my strong foot's on the floor, my right one wants to do the movement. So when you do your cartwheel, you want knees in the air and these two on the floor. And that's kind of how I explain it to them, and I get them to buy in a little bit more that way. But that's kind of how I break it down, like, for me. But it's really interesting you say that, because there's definitely that common thread of the Russian coach and that kind of almost being able to see things so far ahead that they're just planning. Like, Sergey was incredible at that, my coach. He's from Russia as well, and I know he's friends with your coach. So Sergey would plan like 6, 7, 8 years ahead. I'd be like, what? And he'd make me do skills that like weren't even valued in the code, but 5 years later I'd be able to do them like that. And I'd be like, wow, this is unbelievable. And it was similar with that. And what you say about the twisting there, just to go on a little bit of a tangent, I used to train out of Loughborough, and every Tuesday, Damien Walters and the tumbling team from Derby would come. And I was on trampoline one time, and I was chatting to him, and he was explaining to me how he taught himself to twist the wrong way. And I was like, what? You did what? And he was like, yeah, I just decided I'm going to see if I can teach myself to twist the wrong way, because I'm trying to coach somebody like a different technique. And I asked him to explain it to me. And when he explained it to me, he said, I'm doing a half in and then I'm doing a front somersault with a twisting out. And I was like, that's weird, because I didn't think of it like that. I was like you. I was like, no, if I'm doing a double-double, I'm doing like full in, full out. Or if I'm doing a triple-double, I'm going full in, double out. So I listened to him, and then I went and started watching Kohei Uchimura, who was the Japanese gymnast, and slowing down what he was doing. And I noticed that he was doing like a 1.5 in and then a front half out and watching the floor the whole time. Or if he did a triple double, he'd do 1.5. When I learned that, it changed everything. I never got confused again. I was always fine. And like, I always knew exactly where I was in the air, and my peripheral could always see the floor. And I think that changed a lot for me listening to Damien. So it's really interesting how tumbling and gymnastics there maybe don't purposely cross-pollinate, but there's a lot we could learn from each other. And I've always found it very interesting that in Russia, for the artistic national team, they have a tumbling coach.
Yes, yeah.
I've always found that, why don't we have that? Like, because they're so specialized in what they do. Like the tumbles you guys are doing, look, there are guys in men's gymnastics and girls on the women's side that can do incredible tumbles, but they're still not quite as difficult as the tumbles you guys are doing. So surely we should be looking at them and going, what can we learn from those guys over there that are almost like the 100-meter sprinters of athletics? So it's really cool that you talk about that, and thank you for explaining that, because you explained it really well. Can you tell me a bit about the influence that Vov had on your career, Lucie, and maybe your childhood growing up?
Yeah, I mean, again, people ask me this question all the time, and it's one of those things where, like, I still don't know how to answer it. Like, if he hadn't approached me that day on trampoline, like, my life would be so different in terms of who I am as a sports person, but also who I am as a person. Because I mean, even my parents say it, like, they're so glad and like proud that I was pretty much brought up by a mad Russian, because I was in the gym majority of my life. And And I was so he's just taught me so much, from obviously how to tumble, but just so many other life lessons. Like, he's disciplined me, which my parents obviously so grateful for, especially when I was growing up, And it was the kind of thing where they would work together. If I was naughty at home, not that I really was, my mum would tell Vov, and then he would be mad at me for the session, and vice versa. So I was actually quite like a good kid, because I think personally, because I was brought up by him. He just, and like you said, his vision from, I guess, when I first joined tumbling, he knew exactly where I was going to finish. And I think that's why, I value him so much, because he just believes with all of his heart. And if I was ever having a bad day, or if I went to a competition and I was like, "Vov, this is it," "Oh, it's just rubbish," self-doubt, he would always just so casually be like, "Luce, it's okay. It's okay." And I was like, "How? What?" But I was like, "How is he being so calm and collected?" But it's because he knew he'd had this 5-year plan, And I just think yeah, it's such a tough question that's such a tough question to answer. But yeah, without him, I 100% would be a very different person.
It's interesting you say that, Lucy, because my best friend and my old training partner, we both grew up together. Sergey was our coach. We're still best friends now. And he said to me once, he was like, "Do you know how lucky we were to be born 10 minutes away from one of the best clubs in the country, and then for one of the best coaches in the world to just turn up to that club?" And maybe you feel the same, when you're telling me that story about the day that he spotted you, and the words that he used there were quite interesting, right? Because maybe an English person would take that as very arrogant, like, "Well, this guy thinks he's great." But when you know Russian people and Russian culture and what they're like, it isn't that. He's just seen an athlete like you 100 times, and he goes, "That athlete, right, I can do something here. I can do my work. I can do my best work, and we can work together." And it's really cool that you speak so highly of him as well. Because I'd say the same thing. A lot of it was the gymnastics side, right? But for me, he believed in me so much. Sometimes it was very overwhelming and felt like pressure. I was like, "How can you believe in me that much? I don't know. I don't get it. You've got so much blind faith in my ability. I can't see that." And sometimes I think that can be quite hard when you're growing up to it feels like a lot of pressure. But it's really interesting that you say that. When did tumbling become, I guess, very serious, in that you were like, "Right, I've got a real shot here at competing at the highest level"? And maybe at that time and that cross junction in your career, Lucy, what was the path of the tumbler? What did it look like?
Well, it was interesting because I joined, and after the whole round off palaver and then finally getting into some routines, I went to my first British championships in 2007. And this is how kind of naive I was, I guess, because I went there and, there were other coaches there. I think, Damien was there, or Mr. Walters was there at the time. Damien and Craig Lowther was there. And it was just kind of I had all these coaches. Oh, and Matej Todorov was there because he was involved with tumbling. All these coaches kind of come up to me and, "Oh my God," we'll come up to Vov, because obviously we were there together, but I just overheard. "Oh my God, who is this? Where have you found her? Blah, blah, blah." And anyway, that competition, I did the first routine, and the second routine, I ended up stopping in the middle of the track. I don't know what happened. I was like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "It's okay. I'll go back training." I later found out that was a trial for the World Championships later on in that year. And I was so when someone told me that, or when I think Vov told me, I was like, "Oh, what's a World Championships?" I was just a kid that loved to tumble. Anyway, so I didn't do that World Championships. The next British, I came around in 2008 with a little bit more kind of, with a bit more of a brain on my shoulders. And I realised, okay, British is a big competition. It's a big thing, got to do well. And I ended up winning that competition. And then I went to my first World Championships in 2009, a year later, and I did the same thing. I think I had a lot of pressure. I since that first British, then we did a lot of little competitions. I'd won, I think, all of them. And then we got to the Worlds, and I think because a bit like you were saying, how it's quite that hard pressure sometimes, that your coach believes in you so much. I think I just felt it. And, because maybe the choice of wording was a little bit wrong, but Vov just kept saying to me, "If you do your routines, you're going to win, you're going to win." So I think maybe I was a bit oh, well, it should be easy because I can do my routines really easy. Anyway, I got there. I stopped on the first, literally, I think I stopped on the round off. Like the first skill, like the round off twist, I stopped. And then the next routine, again, I was a little bit naive with this because the next routine, Vov said, okay, we've learned a full, a double. We weren't going to put it out until the final, but you've got nothing to lose. Just do it in the second run. So I ended up doing, I think I was maybe 12 or 13 at the time. I ended up doing twist of full tuck, which no other girls were doing at that age. And the amount of coaches that especially the coaching team that approached me and Volvo just said, like, they all shook my hand. At the time I was like, I don't know what they're shaking my hand for, but there was like congratulating me and Volvo for saying, like, wow, you've just got a kid that age to do that skill. And I was so naive because I was like, oh, I've just done that routine, twist of full, like, yeah, like I'll make it to the final. But obviously I just stopped in the previous run. So even a few competitions in, I still didn't know how tumbling worked. Like I trained, I went to a competition thinking it would just be the same thing. But, you mess up in the first routine, you can't just do a second run and then go to the final. Obviously it's the scores, collate. So yeah, it took a while for me to kind of understand tumbling. And I think it was coming home from that World Championships where I was like, okay, I need to do my research. Like I need to actually understand the sport I'm doing because I love it. But if I want to progress, I need to understand the sport a bit more. And it was then that I began to learn the ins and outs of tumbling.
And do you think up until that point, you'd basically just given Vov all of the reins? Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And then you took a bit more maybe personal responsibility too. How does this actually work? Because I want to be successful and I want to do well here.
Yeah, 100%. Up until that world, it was like, okay, like I was like a little puppy, like, Bob, what am I doing? And I think after that competition, it was the case of, okay, let's work together. And from then onwards, like, yeah, my career just like progressed like continuously. I think because I knew he believed in me so much, but then, like you said, I was taking a bit more personal responsibility, and that together we just worked so well hand in hand.
It's really interesting what you said there, Lucie, about the choice of words that you used in that moment. And I think for coaches quite often maybe don't think about the word. It needs to be the right words at the right time. And what happens quite often in gymnastics, and I don't know whether when you would compete in tumbling for Great Britain, Lucie, would it always be your personal coach, Vov, or would sometimes you go away with a national coach instead of your personal coach?
So at the beginning of my career, the first probably 2 or 3 World Championships, Vov was there as a personal coach as well.
Okay.
But then from maybe the age of 15 onwards, Vov didn't come. It was only really the national coaches.
And then probably at that point, you kind of have to mature as an athlete, don't you? Because what tends to happen is, if you go away with a national coach and maybe they don't have the context of the last 2 months of your training, they could say the wrong thing at the wrong time. And whereas Vov would know exactly what to say in the right moment, and that you really need to learn thick and fast, don't you, at that point? And almost you have to become quite a professional athlete to even at times, even a national coach that might be, very highly regarded, you sometimes have to put that advice to one side and go, no, I need to trust, my personal coach and what we normally do, because it's hard when you're a national coach. You're coming in without that context. You don't know what the training's been like for the last 2 months. So it was interesting that you said that choice of words. Do you think that's something that Vov himself as a coach worked on and got better at as you went through, because you learn together, right? And I think even if you meet your coach, so I met Sergey in 2001, so he would have been at that point maybe 40. But I think he learned a lot throughout the journey with me together, and a lot of that was learning through making mistakes with me as well along the way, and maybe now he doesn't make those mistakes as much. And I think maybe that last step of coaching is not necessarily the technical stuff, it's that like man management mindset. So I'm sure you probably learned together as well. It's not just the coach teaching the athlete, is it? You are a partnership.
Yeah, 100%, and that's what we always used to say, especially when I was getting to the age where I was talking, like, I say talking more, but when you're a kid, you kind of like, you're a bit like, well, I felt like a bit like a robot. I'd go in just kind of, okay, yes, right, it's my job doing it. As you grow together, that's quite literally what you do. You grow together, you're learning how each other works. I could walk in, I could look at Vov on the outside of the gym, and I know exactly what mood he was in, and he would do the same to me. So it was very much like the more time we spent together, the more time we worked together, it was, I think, the more we were learning more about each other as people was when our work and my tumbling started to really progress. And I think that is such a vital part of a coach athlete relationship, is learning how each other works. Because, you know, I could have a day where I'd had a miserable day at school or something, or in my personal life, and he would know, and he would know, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to push Lucie so much. And a funny story to tell, actually, I can't remember what it was. It was the British I won 2008. So obviously coming out of the previous year where I had to kind of like redeem myself. I only found this out when I retired and when I was going to Cirque, that my coach Vov, leading into that British Championships, we had podium training, so the training before, and he actually, it was 2008, so I was young, I was maybe 11. He actually asked my mum and dad if he could make me cry in the podium training.
Right.
And yeah, he told me when I retired, and I that podium training was awful. Like I literally remember it like to this day, and it was awful because I was like, oh my god, my training is so good, but he's just telling me it's not, and I'm doing everything wrong, and you know, all this sort of like, I guess, negativity towards the tumbling. But in my head, I was like, but I'm doing really good. Like, I feel really good. And he was like, I made you cry that day. He was like, your training was perfect. He was like, like I said, he remembers that training session like it was yesterday. He was like, your training session was perfect, but I know you. And that last year we were training, every time you had a phenomenal training session, you'd come in the next day and you'd have an awful one. So he was like, I know, because your training leading up to that had been so good. He said, I need you to have a bad training session because otherwise you're going to have a bad competition. So yeah, that podium training, I was miserable. And I remember coming back to the hotel and I was like, oh my God, tomorrow's going to be awful. But the next day I come in and I win British because I had a bad session. But because of my personality.
What a story, yeah.
I'm very much a person that's like, no, I'm going to come in and redeem myself. Like, I'm not having a bad session. So because I had that in my head that it was bad, I came in to like prove myself. And yeah, I won British.
I've had similar situations to that as well. And I think my opinion on that is that only works for so long, because as soon as the athlete gets to a certain age and they figure out what you're doing and they know that there's some reverse psychology going on, they're back engineering. So it's useful for a point, and then at some point, and that normally for a male gymnast is when I had a great piece of advice once from a teammate that said, next time he's frustrated with you, look him dead in the eyes and his tone will come straight down. And I was like, I'm going to try it, because I'd always be by the chalk bucket like this, because he didn't give out praise much, Sergey. So the next time I did it, I looked him dead in the eyes and his tone just went straight down. I was like, wow, that's like the best thing. That's the best advice I've ever been given. But Sergey was similar, and I had a coach that was not Sergey. He was like the head coach of the gym, and I used to get to pommel horse and always fall off when I was a kid. And so I'd get my falls out the way on pommel horse and I'd smash the other 5, and I'd normally do quite well. And this one British Championships, I fell twice on pommel horse, and we started on pommel horse. And he said afterwards, Sam, you just got to get you angry and then you compete really well. And I was like, oh, that doesn't sound like the best way to go about it. But it's really interesting that you say that. Straight away, loads of stories were popping up in my head of situations with Sergey where I've been in that situation and it's actually worked. At the Youth Olympic Games when I was 17, I was in the parallel bars final, and I finished 4th and I took a big step on my dismount, and Sergey was livid that I didn't get a medal. And I was like, no, it wasn't a great routine. Like, I didn't deserve a medal. And we had this like back and forth like a married couple. And then he didn't talk to me for half an hour. He just refused to talk to me. And so I warmed up ready for the high bar, and then I went out on high bar first up and like won the gold. And then I was like, and then he was so happy with me, and I was like, you were just playing. Knew exactly what he was doing. So there's so many similarities there with what you say. Tell me then about the build up to that 2015 World Championships, Lucie. I know there's a lot of years we've got to cover there because we're kind of that like 2009, 2010. What did that look like? Was it just constant progression? You're obviously moving maybe from being a junior athlete to a senior athlete in between that. Can you tell me what that looked like, Lucie?
Yeah, if I'm honest, like the years, that gap from 2009 to 2015, it was quite easy if like I find a word to explain it, because I kind of kept progressing really, and I just seemed to thrive off of that. So yeah, competitions were going really, really well, both European World Championships and British Championships. They were going well. And then I got to the beginning of the year in 2015, And again, I remember this so vividly. We had just gone to a training camp in Denmark, where it was fun. We were just having fun, learning new skills. And Damien was there as well, Damien Walters. And he was explaining to me the twisting, because I remember saying to him, at that point, I was learning back in full transition. And I remember saying to him, like, I feel like I'm just at a point where, like, I've learned all my skills and, like, I'm kind of not bored, but just a bit like, what's next? So he was like, well, why don't we, like, he was explaining the way of twisting in terms of, like, the 1.5, half out. And he was like, you learn that, you'll be so spatially aware. Anyway, I tried it the whole of Denmark and I was like, I get it, but, like, I still don't really get it. So I'm just going to stick with, like, my way. Absolutely fine. And then a couple weeks later, we were home and I was playing on trampoline with Christoph Willerton. And we were playing a game of Stick It. Go through all the skills. I get to full fall and it's like I jump and then, like, I go, but, like, I don't do anything. I just jump in the air. And, like, my head goes back, but I'm like, I shake it off. I was, that was weird. Let me try again. I was like, Christoph, give me another go. So I went to go again, did the same thing. Like, it was like my head wanted to go, like, I wanted to do the skill, but, like, something stopped me. And I was like, it doesn't matter. I was like, we've had a really good, like, had an intense training session. I'll come in on Monday. Didn't think about it the whole weekend. Coming on Monday, like, just forgetting that even happened. And then all of a sudden I remembered and I was like, that was weird, actually. Tried it again and I couldn't do it. So that's when, I guess, the mental block started. And I didn't call it a mental block at the beginning. I just was like, maybe it's just not my day today. Anyway, kind of cut long story short, it started with a full fall. So I could, that was the only skill I couldn't do. I could do full ins, back in falls, everything else. And anyway, it kind of got to a point where, like, I couldn't stand in full twists. I kind of got to a point where I was getting scared on everything, like double straights, double pikes, whips, like I was beginning to doubt everything. So it was officially a mental block and I was trying to find the answer to so many things. I was like, why is this happening to me? Like, training's going so good and, all this stuff. And I remember speaking to Tracy, the trampolining national coach at the time, and she basically just said, she was like, Luce, stop looking for an answer. Like, she was like, it could be anything. It could be a growth spur. It could be, it literally could be anything. She was like, you're wasting weeks, months trying to look for an answer where you could be like finding a solution. So I was like, okay, that's absolutely, like, fantastic advice. So that's when I started to try, like, different things. I tried everything. I tried different techniques, like Damien was talking about. I tried breaking it down again. Some days were good, some days were absolutely awful. I tried training in different gyms. I didn't train in Pinewood for a long time because I was like, maybe I need to get out of the environment, which Vov did not like whatsoever. And obviously at this time, Vov is like, the man that can fix everything is now, this is unfixable, like some days I would do it, some days I wouldn't. And he's like, what the hell is going on? Anyway, before leading up to the World Championships, obviously I was like, I want to go, like, I don't want to miss a Worlds. Like, I've not missed one throughout my whole career. So we kind of came up with a plan. I would train at Liddishall Monday to Thursday with Craig Lowther, and then train at my home gym Friday and Saturday, which that we had a solid plan. And as much as Bob didn't like it, I knew he had, like, I could see he was having to bite his tongue, like, obviously we worked together for so many years and he didn't like that he couldn't fix something and couldn't be a part of it, but he was still a part of it. So myself, Craig and Vov, we all came up with a training program, and we worked together. And I worked with Craig Monday to Thursday, which was fantastic because it was one-to-one training pretty much in a different environment. I was doing full falls and I'd managed to confidently get full in pikes back. I wasn't doing back in falls, so I was doing full in pikes on track, back in full falls, doing it off fast track, off trampoline into pit. So training was going really well. And I said to Craig and I said to Vov, look, if I get into Worlds, like, my mentality is just to go there for the team because it was a team event this year. So I was like, I know I can do a really good team run and hopefully, like, be a part of that success. I said individual, like, this year maybe, like, it's not for me. So I was like, let's just focus on one routine. So I just had, like, one routine to focus on. And then I get to Worlds and Vov wasn't there as a personal coach this time. So again, it was all about, like, communication and calling him all the time. Craig was there. And I do the prelims routines, really good. I do the team final routine, which is, like, exactly what I went there for. And I don't know how, I got into the individual final. And it was one of those things where I was like, I don't even want to do it. Like I have one run that I can do. Like I have one run that I can do, and then I have one like really like for me like basic routine. And it was that thing of like, God, if I'm in a world final, like I don't want to go there and just like I'm in a world final. Like I want to prove who I am. And so I did my first routine. It was double straight to full in pike. And it was nice. I'd made like a little mistake, but like not that really, like the judges obviously noticed, but like if you were looking, you wouldn't really notice. And I remember I looked back at Christoph, who's like there doing all the math like behind. And I looked at him and I said like, I was like, what the hell do I do now? Because I haven't got any skills left, if I'm honest, unless I want to do like really easy skills. I was like, I've got nothing. And he said, if you want, like he was miming to me, and he was like, if you want bronze, you can double pike, or if you want to push yourself, you can full in straight. Now, full in straight for me was like a skill that I only really did off trampoline. Like I didn't really do off track because I just didn't like the feeling of it. And I literally remember, I said to him, I was like, okay, thanks. Like, and I remember standing at the top of the track for my second routine. And before I presented to the judges, I literally like said to myself, I was like, I'm not doing a double pike. Like in a way, like come on, Luce, like you're better than that. Like push yourself. And I said to myself, I was like, if this transition comes out well, I was like, it's your body, it's your control. You've had 9 months of training, like of doing full. You know that feeling. Just like believe in yourself and rely on that muscle memory. And the transition came out perfectly. And I remember thinking, I was like, oh no. And all of a sudden, I'm in the flick and the full is just happening. And to this day, it's probably one of my favourite videos to watch because Craig's in the background. I'm like midway through the full and his jaw just drops. I land it, and it's probably one of the most perfect full falls I've ever done. And I got a silver medal. And like I've always said, that silver medal will beat any gold medal that I've ever got.
Yeah, I watched that routine in prep for this conversation, Lucie, and for me, when you do that double straight transition is so beautiful. It's like when I watch tumbling and someone does a beautiful tumble, it's almost like rhythmical. It's the combination of that noise, that sound. Like you close your eyes and you can hear it. It's like smooth, the pattern in between, like the big tumbles. And that double straight is just a thing of beauty into that transition. And then it's amazing now to know the story behind that double, because I guess that's where the outburst of emotion comes from. And then I don't know you, right? And I've watched you train. And I think around that time, maybe that you were training with Craig, I was based out of Lilleshall as well, because we'd go there 3-4 days a week. And I'm pretty convinced that I can remember you having those struggles and those blocks and seeing you struggling on fast track or track during that time. So now seeing that outburst of emotion after I watched that video, it makes so much sense. But yeah, I think there's only a few times in your career, right, where you ever have those experiences that feel like you press that autopilot button and it's a bit like an out-of-body experience and everything just works and you almost can't feel it. It's like, did you ever have that, Lucie, when you were doing a tumble? And maybe it was that one at the World Championships where almost you can't feel your feet hitting the floor. It's like a strange feeling.
Yeah, for me, the older I got in my career, it was definitely a case, and that one, like to this day, I don't remember doing that full. Like it was almost like I went from the flick to the landing zone, and it was like I don't remember what happened in between, but yeah, that emotion after that was just like everything. But the older I got, before every routine, I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't feel I just went heavy. I went cold, I went shaky, like I couldn't feel anything. But the moment I like stepped into the round off, it was like I still couldn't feel everything, but it was like my body was like almost like it was just like, I don't know, you know how like a transformer like transforms into like the whatever it is, I don't know, but that's what it felt like. I felt like I was going from like nothing, like a dead soul, to just like power. And that was something that I really had to kind of like mentally work on myself, because I was like, how can you go from feeling like jelly to like that? And it was something that whenever I felt that way, I really didn't want to compete. And the older I got, the more I was like, I don't want to do it. Like I remember at one Europeans, I literally said to our national coach, I was like, does one of the other girls want to take my spot? Because like, pull me out of the final, I don't want to do it. It was such a, the older I got, the more kind of mental training, I guess, I needed to do those routines because it was just so different.
When you look back now, Lucy, at that period of time where that mental block started, have you been able to pinpoint anything in your whole career that you go, maybe it was this and maybe it was that? You know, I've had those mental blocks myself in my career, and a lot of the time they seem to come about when I was stressed, tired, fatigued, overtrained. Maybe I was doing something quite simple for me and I wasn't thinking about what I was doing, and then it maybe went wrong, and then I was like, oh no, now can I do that, or does that not happen? And yeah, there were a few times in my career where I really struggled. Typically in artistic, I think it's a lot to do with when you're trying to do a skill without a twist.
Yes.
The twist seems to be okay, but when you do, it's kind of a skill without a twist. And then when I spoke to Bryony last week, she said, actually, a lot of the time in trampoline, it's you can't jump, you just you freeze. And so I don't know whether in tumbling it's more, like you said, it's getting lost with the twist, again, a bit more like artistic. But have you been able to pinpoint anything? And what have you done, Lucy, or what did you do following that to maybe manage that mental block as you carried on training in tumbling, and then obviously going on to what you did after you retired?
Yeah, do you know what? I like, even to this day, I have no idea. And I kind of put it down to like the 10 years I was doing it for, like leading up to the mental block. I was so fortunate in terms of like never had a physical injury, like nothing was going wrong in my career. And I kind of put it down to like, okay, well, everyone has a little hurdle in their career at some point, or a big hurdle in their career at some point, and this is mine. Like, you know, even to this day, like knock on wood, like I've never had a physical injury, and I kind of I've just said to myself, Luce, this is your hurdle, this is your challenge. Are you going to get through it, or are you going to like let it beat you? And I think when I kind of like put that label on it, it then did start to get a little bit easier to train through it. Even now, like I haven't done that skill in about, I think last time I did it, I was at Cirque, and it was probably three years ago, 21. Yeah, 21, 22. So yeah, and this is going to be like an awful training sort of program, so no one follow this if you're listening to this. But since the block, I only trained it as and when I felt like I could do it. So I wouldn't push myself. Like, it wasn't like, oh, you've got to do 5 full falls today. If I wasn't feeling it, like, I wasn't doing it, you know, which is probably not the best sort of like mentality to have. But I knew that I didn't really have that many years left in my career. And I knew that as long as the muscle, like I did cap it, you know, like it wasn't like, oh, I'm not going to do it for 5 months, then I'll just do it in competition. That wasn't the case, because I knew I had to be safe. So I did kind of, you know, during a week, okay, I've got to do 7 full falls. But it could be, if you want to do 5 on Monday, do 5 on Monday. If you don't do any until the last day, it was like as and when I felt like I was ready to do it. And then at competition, I think I also thrived on the pressure, and I thrived on that sort of like, oh, you've presented, like now you've got to do it, you know. Like I really enjoyed that, which is probably not a good thing. And I managed to do it in, I think after 2015 Worlds, I did it in every competition at least once.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's brilliant. What would you know, if you were to go back to a younger Lucy that first had that mental block, what piece of advice would you give her for that situation?
I would, and I only really thought about this during COVID. So during COVID, I ended up buying a trampoline, like an Olympic trampoline, and putting it in my garden. And I retaught myself how to twist the trampolining way. So I thought of everything that Damien had said to me in terms of, like, you know, half, Barani. And honestly, the moment I got that, I still got a video of it. I was just doing a standing full twist on the trampoline. And I finished, and I was like, oh my God, like I did a Barani. Like I actually felt the forwards twisting in a backwards element. And that's when I then started to like twist really confidently again, full ins, back and falls, full fall. So I think if I were to go back and I was, you know, telling myself when I had the block, what are you going to do now to try and prevent this? I would be more open-minded with, nope, let's start again. I was kind of fighting with myself, like I could break down the full fall and relearn it, but then I'm too scared to mess up everything that I've done already. So it was really like, I was trying to be open-minded, but I knew I only had a couple of years left in my career, and I didn't want to mess up everything that I'd done the last 10 years. So it was a bit of a battle, but I think if I were to go back now, I'd say to myself, just learn it from the start again.
That's
because
brilliant.
like you said, when you do feel the forwards element, you're so spatially aware that you know everywhere you're going. If anything happens, you know where you are, which I think was my problem. I was all based on feeling, whereas I wasn't a visual person.
Yeah, it certainly is like a, oh, I've got it moment. Like, I can remember like celebrating, like, I figured it out because this thing is causing me so much mental anxiety, but now I feel safe. Like it was certainly that for me when I kind of figured that out, because I was getting asked to start doing quite big gymnastics, and I was going, I'm actually frightened here because I can do it, but I don't know how I'm doing it. And I remember when I got a bit older, I would say things to Sergey like, Sergey, I'm doing this skill, but I have no idea how I'm doing it or how to teach it. Like, how am I explaining this to someone? And then when I started to think about that a bit more, I think I really started to like deeply understand like the mechanics of what I was doing, and that was super helpful for me. Tell me about joining Cirque then, Lucie, and then, you've had those mental blocks and you're now going to do something that, to me, I watch. You're on a stage, you go to a Cirque show where there's fast track involved and you're potentially doing bigger gymnastics than maybe you were doing on tumbling track when you were tumbling. How did that come about, and what was that experience like touring with Cirque?
So being with Cirque was like quite literally a dream come true. Like, I think like a lot of people that know the Cirque industry or they come from tumbling anyway, when they watch it, when I watched Allegria in, I think, 2013, the moment I saw the power track open, I was like, I'm going to do that one day. And I think talking about, I think you touched on it a few questions ago, but the natural progression for tumbling, I think if you don't really want to coach, I think a lot of people do aspire to be in Cirque. So that was always something that I kind of had in the back of my mind. And I went to an audition in 2017, just to sort of like get my name in the books, get my name out there. And then when they were going through the creation process of Allegria, the casting approached me and said, this is happening, are you interested? And at the time I was like, oh, I don't know, like I'm not sure if I'm ready to retire yet, like from competing. But then after speaking to Vov and my parents and whatnot, Vov just said, Luce, if you can, your career has been phenomenal, and if you can now get paid for doing exactly the same, like he was like, do it. So yeah, I joined Cirque in 2018. And it was scary, and I had that same thing. I thought, oh God, like, obviously I've sent in my show reel and I've got full falls, I've got all these twisting elements in there, which I can do if you really need me to do it, but I don't really want to because I want an easy life, I don't want to have that like mental sort of stress. And I went there. The creation it was just like such a surreal experience, like literally going into Montreal and creating the show from start to finish and seeing it all like unfold and come together was just like beautiful. And yeah, being a part of that show, it was literally what, 12-year-old me had dreamt for so long. But interesting how you say, you go there and you're doing harder skills and whatnot. It's quite the opposite, actually. So we're obviously doing 7 to 10 shows a week. So the biggest skill I did on a daily basis was like a double straight split or like a double straight or like a nice double pike kick out. It was the kind of thing where like don't get me wrong, the guys did like some big tricks, but the biggest trick in terms of like a normal day-to-day was a triple back, which for a guy is quite an easy skill. So the skills were easier in terms of like in comparison to competition, but you were having to maintain that for 10 shows a week. So even though, yes, the skills are easier, you're also doing that alongside a 7-minute cardio track where like you're dancing, you're running around and you're doing synchronized tumbling. So going from tumbling, which essentially is sort of an individual sport, to a team of, I think 12 to 14 people was something that I had to really kind of adapt to. So there was a lot of learning curves and a lot of things that I had to kind of adapt to essentially, which was different to competitive tumbling.
I guess as well, I've probably not thought there that the impact on your body is going to be a lot less if you're doing fast track or power track, right? Potentially than doing track every day, just repetitions on the track.
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting because you do think that, and I think to some extent, it probably does, but the power track is so hard. And I think, when you've got the landing zone is a lot shorter. So the block you're doing is a lot deeper. Okay. So a lot of people's ankles, Achilles, I mean, we were very obviously fortunate to have physiotherapists there and, access to massage. So we were very well looked after. But yeah, a typical city run for us was, 2 to 3 months. So doing that constant for 2 to 3 months, it does take a bit of a toll, especially on your Achilles. But it's just about looking after yourself and being smart with what you do, which again, I think is why people aren't throwing huge tricks, because the bigger trick you do, the steeper you're blocking,
And what was that fast track? What was the bed like itself, Lucy? Is it similar to a fast track you'd have in a gymnastics gym or completely different?
Oh, it's completely different. I don't know if you've ever been on a fast track in Denmark, the white one. I don't know what brand it is, but basically it's like a normal fast track, but like just pulled so much tighter. So like if you were to walk on it, it doesn't really feel like you're walking on a trampoline, but if you know how to work it, like, my God, you can like use it. So, and for me, when I first went there, it probably took me a good 2 3 months, maybe even longer, like 6 months, to understand, okay, this is the timings, what I have to do. It was one of those things where, yeah, like it doesn't feel like a trampoline, but if you know exactly how to use it and work together, it's amazing.
Oh, that sounds so exciting. I used to love fast track so much. I used to be fair, I would do fast track sometimes with some of you guys that were at Lilleshall. And
I remember, yeah.
Before I shattered my ankle, I was prepping. My first tumble on floor when I was 21 was a whip double pike Arabian, and we were training a whip triple back for the Worlds. And that was inspired by speaking to the tumbling coach, Sergey speaking to, I think, Vov and the tumbling coaches, and us watching and going, wait a minute, like, these guys are doing things from flicks and whips. If we just cut out the hands from the flick and do a whip like we're doing on fast track, we could do a whip triple back and get a connection bonus. And we were training it. So I was training it on track to level mats, but I never got the chance to do it because after that, and I think this is why I liked fast track as well. Like, my ankle just could never take off the same. But on fast track, that was taken away. So I could almost live what I want. Because floor for me, I had great results on high bar, but I loved tumbling. I just loved tumbling because it was just play. I loved to play with everything, but then I couldn't ever do that because of my ankle. But when I went on fast track, it took away that element of the floor and being in that right takeoff position, and I could do it again, and I felt like the 21-year-old before I shattered my ankle. It's interesting that you explain what it feels like on that fast. I'd love to feel it. What was it a nice feeling, Lucy? And I don't know, I might be wrong here, but I imagine that because of tumbling and where it was at maybe when you were coming up to retirement throughout your career, with it not being an Olympic sport, it doesn't necessarily have the funding that artistic has and maybe trampoline has now. Was it a nice feeling going to Cirque and being paid for what you do and you're good at?
It definitely was, but also, yeah, I think it was just, I mean, I would have I did tumbling anyway, for me, it was something I just loved doing, that I wasn't too bothered. I mean, there was a period of time where we were going to Lilleshall more where I was like, wow. And you hear stories from Damien and from Rob Small, Kath Pebbody, where they lived at Lilleshall and they trained. And for me, I was like, wow, that'd be cool to eat, sleep and train, and get paid for it. But I think, going to Cirque, for me, obviously it was, this is literally your job. It's not just your hobby. So getting paid to do something you love was obviously great. But for me, it was just learning so much other things, other than tumbling. Because I was quite confident in my tumbling, but then learning how to move and learning how to dance and learning how to, all those little things that pieces the show together. It was just so fun to learn all of that. So I think, being a part of the show, and that has been special for so many years, and getting to recreate that and being a part of that team and that bubble, it was just such a proud feeling. It was really nice.
I imagine it would be incredible being in that melting pot of ideas and gymnastics knowledge, because I'd imagine if someone had an issue, someone somewhere has had that before, and everyone can kind of help each other, but maybe come at it from a different angle because they're from different disciplines. I imagine that would be really cool to be around, just whoa, this person over here did, I don't know, trapeze, and they've got this idea about how maybe you should let go and catch, which is different to what I'm doing. And
yeah, it was really nice as well, because our team, we had so many different people from all over the world, and you have your head coach, but for me, I found it really hard to go there and not be coached. I mean, I don't know if you were similar, but Vov coached me on everything. There wasn't a single run, unless he was in a bad mood and wasn't talking to me, he would just coach me on everything. So I had something to focus on every single go. And then going to Cirque and like you're now a professional, so like you do you, I was still kind of looking for those like coaching points. So that was really hard to adapt to like to not be like to not be coached. But it was really nice to get information. You know, we had people from Ukraine, from Russia, from America, Canada, Denmark, and to have all those different techniques, like, you know, the Russian and Ukrainians, very similar style to me, because obviously a Russian coach, but then to hear like the Danish technique, it was just like, my mind was like blown. It was so interesting and so fun. And I felt like a little kid again, like learning everything. It was just, yeah, it was great to be a part of a team of so many different cultures and so many different techniques as well, which I think did actually make my tumbling a bit better in a different way.
What was it like, Lucy? You know, I went on your Instagram profile and saw the video of you doing a triple back in the Albert Hall, which looked pretty cool. What was that like, that experience of doing that, like in a big stage like that with an audience? And also, you know, I can see it behind you, you've got the world record for doing like essentially backflips on a spot.
Yeah.
Was it cool to feel like you can still achieve things after you've retired? Because like when you're growing up, you're like, right, the pinnacle of my sport is winning a world medal, and then it just kind of stops. And then I'm done.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, no, there's so much out there that you can do. And I'm finding that myself now I've retired, like, let's just see what's possible. I want to try loads of different things.
Yeah, I think for me, the moment I signed my first contract at Cirque, I already knew that at some point I was going to do a triple. And the reason why is because I spent years and years and years asking or trying to persuade Vov to let me do a triple. Like I wanted to be the first girl to do double straights triple in competitive tumbling. And he was like, no, you know, like, I don't want to ruin your legs and blah, blah, which I understand. Like now I'm older, I understand. Like it is, girls don't do it for a reason, you know, like it is a dangerous skill. So I was like, I'm going on a bouncy power track. Like I'm going to do it in Cirque, you know, I'm going to be the first person to do it in Cirque. So yeah, I was training it for a period of time in North America. And the first time I did it we were in Sacramento. And that was like very similar to the 2015 Worlds with a mental block. Instantly, as soon as I landed it, just like cried. And I think it was that almost that like adrenal fatigue. Like I'd spent months learning it and trying to, you know, perfect it to do in the show. And the moment I landed it, I was like, wow, like I've done it. And then when we found out we were going to the Royal Albert Hall, I was a little bit like, right, I've done the triple, don't need to do it again. You know, like I've been the first girl to do it. So like I've ticked that one off. But in the hall, when I got to the hall, I was like, this in itself is phenomenal. Like I watched my first Cirque du Soleil show in the hall, and this venue, to any British person, and also it was very nice to see within our cast of, you know, there was only 2 Brits in our cast, but everyone else really appreciated and understood how big the Royal Albert Hall was. Like it's such a historical building, and it was so nice to see that it wasn't just like a British person that was like impressed by it. So going in there, I was like, wow, this is incredible. And we had the dress rehearsal, we had the premiere, and my family and friends there. And it was just like such a surreal feeling. And I hadn't trained triple for maybe like a year or so, 6 months to a year. And I was like, you know what? Like, imagine if I do triple with my family and friends in the hall. Like, that'd be cool. And yeah, I started training it for a couple of months, and then I did that. And it was just, that again was very similar to doing it the first time. And it was just one of those moments where I was like, I wish I could just see like 11-year-old Lucy next to me, because like I can imagine she's just looking up like, yeah, you did it, you know? It was just such a surreal moment. And then even the Guinness World Record, when we got approached to try that, or when I got approached to try that, I was like, yeah, sure, like, what the hell? I was like, I didn't even know if they still did them, you know? I remember as a kid flicking through the massive books, and I was like, I'm not going to say no to that opportunity. So doing that in the hall, it was just like, it was a bit like how you said, like, I was a tumbler, but tumbling has like got me into Cirque, has got me a Guinness World Record. Like how many people can say that? Like, and I was really kind of like I was really blown away at like where this sport has taken me so far and is continuing to take me. You know, it's just one of those things where I was like, wow, this is incredible.
Yeah, it's a real gift, right? Like I look at my coach Sergey, similarly the way that you've spoken about Vov, and as I get older, I realize the gift he gave me. Like it's a gift that he gave me, like to be able to travel the world and to have seen so many different cultures, countries, experience all those different flavors of everybody, it's all of my life lessons have come through gymnastics. You know,
Yeah.
I didn't fit into school, mainstream school. It was quite difficult for me and challenging. But my sport became the vehicle in which I express myself, and specifically gymnastics. And now I've been able to turn my gymnastics into what I do for a living. And sometimes I feel like guilty, like I'm cheating, because I'm seeing people go and, you know, work very, very hard. And I'm like, I do work hard, but I really love what I'm doing. Sometimes I have to play down how much I love like what I do, because I feel bad to talk about, oh, yeah, it's great, I'm doing this cool thing and this cool thing. But it seems like you're doing that yourself with what you're doing now. Just to finish off, Lucie, just tell us about what your life looks like right now. You're doing really well on social media, and I think there's a lot of people, which is very exciting for gymnastics-based sports, that have now figured out, wow, this sport is so visual, it translates so well online. There are so many more options now for me and what I can do with my life after retiring from the professional, traditional side of the sport.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what I'm doing now, it's a funny story actually. Whilst I was at Cirque, my brother kind of just like set me up at TikTok, and I'd send him videos and he'd make all these videos, and it was doing quite well actually. And then since coming home from Cirque, we've just like put our head into everything in terms of social media. And I feel like I'm sort of born in the wrong generation anyway. So I'm like, oh, social media, it's not really a thing. But like my brother is proving me wrong every single day. So yeah, now we're getting our head into it, you know, TikToks. The aim is to kind of continue with long form YouTube, and just like, it's crazy because when I go into the gym and I coach, and you know, you get talking to kids and, oh, what do you want to be when you're older? So many people say, I want to be a YouTuber, I want to be an influencer, stuff like that. And I'm like, wow, like back in the day, like a YouTuber wasn't a job, was it? But like now, like it's crazy. So yeah, we're doing that. It's going really well. But also, like the main thing for me at the moment is when I came home from Cirque, it was a bit kind of a sudden way to come home, and I came home and I was lost. You know, I went from Lucie Colebeck, GB Tumbler, Lucie Colebeck, Cirque du Soleil artist, and I came home and I was like, what the hell? What's next? Like, what the hell? And I think like I was speaking to my brother and I just said like, tumblers and probably a lot of sports people spend years and years and years putting so much hard work into their hobby and their passion and their job. They get to their pinnacle, you know, whether that's World Championships, Olympics, then like when they finish, if they don't want to coach or if they don't know what they really want to go into, like what's next? Like what's next? So my brother and I have actually set up an agency sort of thing where we are giving people the opportunity to go into social media. So, you know, like we've done with me, we've used my talent and my gymnastics background, and we're doing social media, you know. And number one, it's giving people, you know, another avenue to go down. And number two, it's broadcasting gymnastics in a different way. And for me, as long as I can keep inspiring the next generation and do my best to like keep gymnastics alive and like keep it going, like that's where I get like my joy from. So that's our goal at the moment. And yeah, we're working with a few people and it's going really well. So hopefully that progresses. And yeah, gymnastics just continues to rise and we continue to give people more opportunities to use their talent in a different way.
That's amazing, Lucie. So what does that look like? Is that you managing their accounts for them? Is that you mentoring them and telling them, look, this is how I did it. You can just walk this path too. These are some of the mistakes we made along the way, and this is how you can avoid making them. What does that look like in working with those other maybe tumblers or people from a gymnastics background and trying to help them with their social media?
Yeah, so essentially it's like a bit of everything, if I'm honest. Like, and it depends what that athlete wants to kind of do. If they literally just want to come in, get a few videos with us, we video everything, we edit everything, you know, we manage their profiles and whatnot and stuff like that. Or if they are interested in, like we've got one guy at the moment that is interested in doing it himself. So yeah, we're doing everything, the videos with him, we're creating content and editing it all behind the scenes, but also we're advising him along the side, like, right, this is what we're doing, this is what we've learned over the last 5 years. So like, yeah, we're giving people the opportunity for what they want to do. Like, do they just want to come in and have, you know, an easy life and do a couple of fun videos and, you know, get paid for it? Or do they want to learn how to do what we've done and create channels themselves, you know? So yeah, there's a whole mix of everything that we can provide for people. But yeah, it's just it's really nice to be able to give people more opportunities in a sport that they've done for a long time. Sorry, I don't know what that noise is.
That's all right, don't worry.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean that's the main goal, is to, because I don't know what it's like in women's and men's gymnastics, but I see so many tumblers that, yeah, like a lot of them, they tumble for so long, and then like I spoke to my friend a couple of months ago. I was like, "Oh, what are you doing now?" And he hasn't touched a tumble track or a trampoline or a gymnastics center in 10 years. And it's just, for me, I'm just like, wow, like I love my sport so much, and I think maybe, I have too much love for it sometimes, but I couldn't imagine not ever like being involved in gymnastics again. It just, yeah, so.
It's brilliant what you're doing, Lucy, and I'm sure lots of other athletes and younger athletes will look at you and what you're doing now and go, oh, there is an alternative career path for me. There's something else other than just being, hopefully crossing your fingers and being one of the 5 men or 5 women in artistic that get to the Olympics, right? Because the reality is 99% of people aren't going to do that, but they've still learned how to do something that most of the people around the world cannot do, and it's incredibly valuable. They just need to figure out how to use that and turn it into something that could support their life maybe after they finish their career, so they don't never go on a high bar again, or never touch a tumbling track, or never go on a trampoline bed. So I think it's amazing what you're doing. Where can people go to find your content, Lucy? And then maybe if there's an athlete listening, because we have a lot of athletes that are still in their sport but also retired, where could they go to maybe contact you, to maybe reach out and say, hey, Lucy, I want to use my gymnastics, I don't really know how to do it, can you help me?
Yeah, so at the moment, my profile's on TikTok. It's just Lucie Colebeck, and the YouTube channel's the same, just Lucie Colebeck. So they're the main kind of social media platforms we're using at the moment. And then in terms of the agency stuff, we have got an Instagram profile, but you can also find the email address in my Instagram profile. So yeah, if you just check out Lucie Colebeck Instagram, and you'll see the email to contact us.
Amazing. Lucy, thank you so much. This has been a brilliant conversation. I've really enjoyed it this morning. Hopefully you enjoyed it too. And I'm excited to keep following you on social media, because the things that you're doing are really cool. Yeah, they're a bit different. I like them. I like that you're trying artistic gymnastics and playing around with both the sports. And I'd love to come down one day and just mess around and try some things. I'm a bit like you. I've started to get into gymnastics a little bit more, and I'm training a bit again. Just as that, like, oh my God, I spent 20 years of my life learning this incredible skill. Like, why don't I use it? Because I really enjoy it.
Yeah. And it's also, like, with what we're doing now, it's just like the fun side of gymnastics. Like I said, like a tumbler trying women's artistic or men's artistic it's just like the fun, silly side of gymnastics, which is, very entertaining and just great for people to watch.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Lucy.
Thanks, Sam.